Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping ourselves into, well, what feels like the fastest, most aggressive vehicle for success, and we're taking a sledgehammer to conventional wisdom.
That's a good way to put it.
If you've ever felt like your goals were just a bit too small, or if you believe the path to financial freedom requires careful, measured steps, you should probably get ready to have your foundational beliefs totally challenged.
Yeah, we're dissecting a philosophy that doesn't just suggest hard work. It argues success isn't something that might happen to you. It is your ethical duty, an obligation.
An ethical duty.
And that duty requires radically expanded thinking and action. Our sources today, taken from key excerpts of the TEDx Rulebook, they demand what they call a massive, constant, persistent attack on every single target you set.
Okay, let's unpack this mission immediately then. The core challenge presented by the sources, right out of the gate, is that humanity, by and large, tends to set subpar targets.
Subpar is the key word.
We're often programmed by these established parameters about what constitutes a lot of money, or what is fair compensation, or what is truly possible for someone in our position.
Right. And the philosophy argues that setting those programmed targets, operating within those established comfortable boundaries, is precisely what sets us up for failure and vulnerability.
What's so fascinating here is the absolute clarity of the perspective. It insists success is not about luck. It's not about talent alone.
No, it's about recognizing it as a matter of duty. And this duty must be backed by levels of action that most people would consider completely unreasonable, maybe even maniacal.
And when you fail to operate at those, what they call 10x levels, the source material suggests you become inherently vulnerable to external shocks.
Even those you couldn't possibly control.
There's a really stark, almost painful example cited in the sources to drive this point home. The U.S. housing collapse and the foreclosure crisis from 2008 onward.
Yes. This is used as the ultimate case study of setting subpar targets for survival.
So how does that work? How can an individual's goal setting be responsible for a global crisis?
Well, the crisis is cited as a perfect example of a sequence of missteps that occurred at a massive macro level.
Yeah.
People who fell victim were fundamentally mistargeting.
Mistargeting how?
They were aiming for normal, acceptable levels of financial stability. They were underestimating the necessary actions for survival in an unpredictable marketplace, and crucially, they were concentrating too intensely on being competitive.
On keeping up with their neighbor.
Exactly, rather than creating a situation that would make them invincible to unexpected setbacks.
I understand the need for massive action in business, but assigning blame for a global recession to individual goal setting, that feels almost punitive. I mean, for the listener who experienced huge, uncontrollable headwinds during that period, how does this philosophy reconcile total responsibility with genuine victimhood?
That's the thing, and it's where the power of the 10x philosophy really lies. It completely removes the concept of blame as a productive exercise. The source material argues that operating on a competitive herd mentality thinking, I have to do what my neighbor or colleague is doing, or taking out the maximum loan that the bank will give you, that's the trap.
So, because you're focused on competition, you are operating based on these external parameters.
Exactly. So the core mistake was asking, what is a reasonable target? Instead of asking, what massive actions do I need to take for myself to dominate my sector and make me impervious to a market collapse?
They operated based on competition instead of domination.
The source makes a powerful, almost brutal claim. Every single person in countless companies and industries that had a negative experience in the housing collapse failed to appropriately set their goals for survival. They failed to set 10x goals, operated at subpar levels, and that made them susceptible.
And had they set goals 10 times higher?
They would have forced themselves to take 10 times the action, resulting in a financial fortress that no external shock could penetrate.
That reframing of failure is the foundation we need to explore. The author even admits he himself got caught up because he hadn't properly set his own 10x targets, which left him susceptible to getting approached by a crook who eventually cheated him.
Yes, and he says if he'd been properly focused on dominating his own goals, taking massive action, he wouldn't have even had time to meet with that person, let alone get involved with them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture then, the fundamental message is you are either dominating your space or you are vulnerable.
And even if you blame the banks, or the government, or bad fortune, that doesn't change the outcome. Only taking radical accountability and massive action changes the outcome. And that begins with establishing the correct mindset about success itself.
So we start our deep dive right there, with the foundation that success is not some happy accident, but a total responsibility. Let's dive into Section 1, the foundations of success, duty and total responsibility.
The shifting definition of success is a great place to start, outlined primarily in Chapter 3 because success is so highly dependent on where a person is in life. If you aren't continually redefining what success means, you've already started the process of retreating.
I appreciate that chronological breakdown because it highlights how easy it is to get complacent based on past achievements. In early childhood, success might mean, receiving an allowance or being allowed to stay up past your bedtime.
And that feels monumental at the time.
It does. But a few years later as a teen, those exact goals are not only useless, but totally irrelevant. Now, success is defined by getting a cell phone or the keys to the car or later curfew.
And as you move into your early 20s, the target shifts dramatically again. Success might be defined by furnishing your first apartment, landing that initial promotion.
Or graduating debt-free.
Right. And then as you age, maybe it's marriage, starting a family, achieving a specific level of financial independence. Then when you're much older, the definition transforms again to focus intensely on good health, time with family, securing your legacy.
So success exists across all realms: financial, spiritual, physical, communal, and familial, and it absolutely must be a constantly moving target.
Complacency is the enemy of expansion. But regardless of the specific goal, whether it's getting an allowance or setting up a multi-generational legacy, the source material argues there are 3 absolutely crucial things you have to know about success.
Okay, what are they?
1, success is important. 2, success is your duty. And 3, there is no shortage of success.
Let's focus on that first point. Success is important. The perspective is that it's vital to the well-being of the individual, the family unit, and the group.
And the reason is that success is what provides confidence, security, comfort, the ability to contribute at a greater level, hope, and leadership.
And this is tied directly back to survival itself. The source looks at success in terms of continuous expansion. Without continued growth, any entity, a corporation, a dream, a civilization, would inevitably cease to exist.
We see this pattern all through history. The Vikings, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, even communist Russia more recently. An endless list of companies that faded away the moment that expansion stopped.
So success isn't a luxury. It's needed simply to perpetuate people, places, and things in the face of, well, inevitable entropy.
Now, here's the most compelling argument, which is outlined in Chapter 4. This is the core ethical component. Success is your duty. The author highlights that a major turning point in their life was approaching success not as something that might happen if they worked hard enough,
But as a duty.
as a duty, an obligation, a responsibility, an ethical issue to their family, their company, and their future generations.
That is a huge shift in mindset. It makes achieving your goals a moral imperative, almost a non-negotiable term of existence. It compels you to act.
It does. But I was struck by the related observation in the sources. Even after spending 17 years getting a formal education that was supposed to prepare the author for the world, not one single course was on success.
Not one.
Nothing on its importance, or what one had to do to secure it.
This systemic omission in formal education is critical because it perpetuates the idea that success is optional, or it's just a matter of luck or talent or being in the right place at the right time.
And the 10X philosophy demands you approach success with the same non-negotiable commitment as any other fundamental responsibility, like paying taxes or feeding your children. If you treat it as optional, you will take optional levels of action.
Which are never enough.
Never.
Okay, moving to the second critical foundation, the illusion of shortage. This is the scarcity mindset that plagues most people. They operate under this tension-increasing, shortage-based thinking.
The zero-sum game.
Exactly. If one person wins, another must lose.
And this notion is explicitly wrong in business and in life, according to the source material. This is where we need to dispel the myth. Consider the major figures cited. Warren Buffett's financial prowess doesn't cap or limit anyone else's ability to create success.
Right. The founders of Google didn't prevent the creation of Facebook.
In fact, their success likely paved the way for more technological expansion. 2 decades of Microsoft's dominance didn't stop Steve Jobs from creating the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad, which in turn spawned entirely new markets.
It's proof that new products, new ideas, successful creations, they don't prevent others from generating success.
Sometimes at even more astounding magnitudes, there is no shortage of success. The only shortage is in the amount of massive action people are willing to take.
Yet the myth persists, perpetuated not just by media, but through simple, everyday expressions of envy or disagreement.
Or suggestions that those who hit it big have been unfairly compensated or have taken more than their share. We see constant media reports of shortages, jobs, money, opportunities, time.
There isn't enough time in the day.
But the source material asks us to look at the simple math. For example, even if 20% of the population is unemployed, 80% have jobs. The shortage is rarely absolute, yet the scarcity mindset just dominates our conversation and, more importantly, our actions.
There's a perfect anecdote illustrating this problematic thought process. The neighbor example.
Yes. The author, who lives next door to a famous Hollywood actor, recalls another neighbor suggesting that the movie star should fix the street potholes because he makes $20 million a movie.
That's a profound social impulse right there. It illustrates the immediate human instinct to penalize or restrict success.
The underlying thought is that because this actor achieved success beyond the neighbor's expectations, he should automatically be responsible for communal burdens or somehow restricted in his wealth.
It reinforces this terrible idea that success must be limited or somehow confined.
And this is dangerous because if you truly believe that success is a limited commodity, you will unconsciously limit your own actions to avoid being seen as greedy or taking too much. This is the ultimate self-sabotage.
The goal is to create so much success and abundance that it benefits everyone around you, not to be dragged down by the restrictive thinking of others.
Absolutely. And that brings us directly to the third foundation, which requires the most uncomfortable level of intellectual honesty, assuming control for everything.
The author originally considered calling the chapter, "Don't Be a Little Bitch."
That certainly drives the message home. It directly rejects victim thinking. The source argues that success doesn't happen to you, it happens because of you and the actions you take.
And people who refuse responsibility, who blame external forces for their lack of progress, they generally fail to take the big, massive actions necessary for success.
Right.
But is it fair to claim responsibility for everything? What about clear external events? A storm, a global pandemic, being laid off due to corporate restructuring?
The philosophy holds that successful people accept very high levels of accountability for both success and failure, precisely because they hate the blame game. Blaming the weather doesn't help you find a solution. The source estimates that roughly 50% of the population suffers from this victim thinking, and those people who use blame as the reason for negative outcomes will never accumulate real success. They'll remain slaves to circumstance.
So the mandate here is to adopt the radical viewpoint that whatever is happening in your world, good, bad, or nothing, is something you caused, either through action or inaction.
You have to elect to claim responsibility and control, even for things that seem external, specifically to generate effective solutions going forward. It's not about emotional guilt, it's a mechanism for empowerment.
Okay, give me an example.
Consider the famous blackout example cited. If the electricity goes out, blaming the city or the state for the power failure is emotionally satisfying but utterly useless.
Of course.
The effective solution, derived from taking radical responsibility, is realizing the failure was not having a backup generator yourself.
That's powerful. This wasn't bad luck or even bad planning. It was the result of turning responsibility over to someone else. The simple lesson: don't be a little bitch, get a generator.
And that mindset applies even when you are clearly wronged. If you are rear-ended in a car accident where the other person is unequivocally at fault, the last thing you want to do is assume the position of victim.
Oh, poor me.
Exactly. Blaming the other driver only extends your status as a victim and a slave to that event. Taking responsibility, for instance, realizing you should have been more vigilant about maintaining distance, or maybe installed a dash cam, enhances your ability to find solutions to ensure that negative events don't take place again.
It transforms you from a powerless victim into a proactive problem solver.
It does. And this high-level accountability is the necessary launching pad for the next stage of the philosophy action.
If we accept total responsibility for our current condition, that forces us to examine the type of effort we're putting in, which the source material breaks down into the 4 degrees of action.
Let's transition now to Section 2. The 4 degrees of action from Chapter 7. These degrees of activity define how people approach their goals and their lives.
Okay, what are they?
1. Do nothing. 2. Retreat. 3. Take normal levels of action. And 4. Take massive action.
And it's important to note that everyone utilizes all 4 degrees at some point, or in different areas of their life.
For sure. You might take massive action in your career, but completely retreat when it comes to, say, physical fitness or mastering a new language. But success only comes from operating consistently at the highest level.
So let's look at the first 2 degrees, do nothing and retreat. These are clearly the basis for failure.
And they're closely related to that victim mentality we just discussed. Starting with the first degree, doing nothing. This means accepting whatever comes your way, giving up on dreams, and no longer taking actions to move forward.
And the interesting counterintuitive observation here is that doing nothing still requires effort and work. It's not a passive state.
It's not. The source points out that it takes effort to lose a job due to lack of production. It takes work to be consistently overlooked for a promotion and then have to explain that failure to your family.
You expend tremendous energy just existing as an underappreciated, underpaid employee, having to manufacture excuses for that condition.
Absolutely. And often, people in the do-nothing category will expend massive action in useless activities like gaming, online poker, binge-watching shows, things that provide an escape but don't produce constructive results.
They confuse activity with massive action.
Exactly. Then the second degree is retreat, which means taking action in the opposite direction of your goals. This is usually justified as a form of protection.
Retreaters claim they are doing this to avoid more rejection or failure.
Right, but it's usually their impression and evaluation of failure that causes the retreat, not the failure itself. They take one setback as a sign to quit. And retreating is not normal, instinctive human behavior.
How so?
Well, if you observe a healthy child, their instinct is to advance, to conquer, to explore. Retreating usually results from being instructed repeatedly in childhood to hold back, be careful, don't touch that.
So it's learned behavior.
It is. And the energy cost of retreat is another major insight. Retreaters spend tremendous energy justifying their position. They use vivid excuses like, the stock market sucks, I'm never investing again, or most marriages fail, I'm staying single.
They spend as much energy, if not more, justifying retreat as a successful person spends creating success.
Precisely. If you're going to expend effort, why not redirect that massive mental and physical expenditure in the direction of domination and success? The energy cost of failure is often higher than the cost of success.
Now we come to the most dangerous category, the one that traps the largest segment of the population, the third degree, taking normal levels of action.
Yes. This is the most prevalent group. It creates the bulk of the middle class and is accepted by society as the gold standard of effort.
And it's dangerous precisely because it's normalized, validated, and often praised. This group takes just enough action to appear average, creating normal lives, but never enough action to create real, lasting success.
They aim to blend in rather than stand out. And this is where the vulnerability we discussed earlier lies. Normal actions only work when conditions are perfectly steady and predictable.
But life is never steady or perfectly predictable?
Never. The moment market conditions are negatively impacted, or when any serious change occurs, which is certain to happen, they realize they are at high risk. Ordinary events, an unexpected medical expense, stress, can throw off a lifetime of acceptable levels of action.
Average action has no cushion. It's the formula for perpetual risk.
And the source material is unequivocal that average is a failing formula. By definition, average is less than extraordinary. The core question is, who would buy a product advertised as fairly average, delivering mediocre results?
Nobody. We don't go out of our way for run-of-the-mill merchandise, yet we accept average results in our own lives.
And this addiction to average imposes a real measurable cost. Look at the statistics cited. The average worker reads less than 1 book a year and works an average of 37.5 hours per week.
And contrast that with top U.S. CEOs, who read over 60 books a year. The average CEO makes 319 times more money than the average worker. It's not just about the hours worked, it's about the relentless pursuit of information and expansion.
And average thinking is punished financially in the corporate world. One of the biggest reasons for business failure is undercapitalization, which is caused by miscalculating how much cash a company would burn through. This is small thinking.
They aim for average capitalization, and average simply doesn't cut it.
It never does. And the author specifically cites their biggest regret: not setting targets 10 times higher than what they originally thought they could accomplish from the very beginning. That initial limitation was devastating.
That realization leads us directly and aggressively to the fourth degree, massive action.
This is defined as constant, persistent, and immense attack on the target. This isn't just working hard, it's total immersion. And crucially, this level of action creates new problems, which is the definitive sign you are truly operating at this stage.
New problems. That sounds counterintuitive. Are we trying to solve problems?
We are, but the problems massive action creates are problems of growth, not failure. For example, instead of worrying about where your next customer will come from, your new problem is managing a massive influx of orders and scaling your delivery logistics. That's a fundamentally better problem to solve.
I see. So the author's personal turning point came at age 25.
It did. Recognizing that it was already hard work not succeeding, the tremendous energy spent on justifying failure, they committed all their energy to their career, shifting focus from destructive activities to massive constructive action.
And the El Paso example is maybe the best illustration of what massive action looks like in real life.
It really is. When starting the seminar business at age 29, the author determined that normal action meant a few calls a day. Massive action meant spending the entire day cold calling and visiting as many as 40 organizations in a single day, regardless of outcome.
40 organizations daily, that's an exhausting number.
It's insane by normal standards. He recounts that in just 2 weeks in El Paso, a city where no one knew him, he had personally seen virtually every business in that market that was capable of buying his training. He didn't stop until he covered the entire territory.
And the pace was clearly unsustainable for anyone operating at normal levels. I believe the source mentioned a real estate agent who tried to shadow the author.
That's right. The agent, who was used to the normal pace of the industry, admitted to being completely exhausted just riding along in the car after 3 days. When you're taking massive action, you aren't thinking in terms of hours worked or whether it's lunchtime.
You approach every moment as though your life and future depend on the immediate next action. It's a continuous, unrelenting attack.
And this commitment needs to continue until massive action is no longer unusual, but a deeply ingrained habit. The external indicators signal you're succeeding. People start asking, why are you still out this late? Or, you never quit, do you?
Massive action becomes your ace in the hole when success is treated as a duty.
And this extreme level of commitment naturally dictates the next critical mindset requirement, which moves beyond competition entirely: domination.
Welcome to Section 3, the domination mindset. Here, the source material throws out a radical challenge. Seek an unfair advantage. The goal is pure domination, not just competition.
This is a truly aggressive term, and it's one that separates the 10x approach from standard business strategy. The source advises, never play by the agreed-upon norms, rules, and traditions of the industry, because those are often traps.
Traps designed to protect the incumbent players.
Exactly, and prevent new ideas and higher levels of greatness. You don't just want to be in the race, you want to be the only one considered a viable solution.
But doesn't aiming for domination risk legal issues or burning bridges in your industry? It sounds like a guaranteed way to attract negative attention.
The philosophy argues that if you're acting with 10x levels of production and value, that risk is mitigated. The real risk is in not dominating, because then you remain vulnerable to others. Domination in this context means making yourself so necessary and your product so pervasive that competition becomes irrelevant.
Okay, let's look at the examples. Tell us about the dental implant company.
This is a perfect illustration of counterintuitive action. While the industry leader decided to cut costs and rely entirely on technology cutting all travel, relying only on the phone and the internet, the smaller company decided to dominate personal contacts.
So they moved into the space the competitor retreated from.
Aggressively. They decided to physically visit every single potential client and referral partner, creating a dominant presence on the ground where the market leader had chosen to be invisible.
And true domination, the source argues, makes your name synonymous with the product. Think of IBM for PCs or Xerox for copiers, where people didn't talk about making copies, they talked about Xeroxing a document.
The target is to own the sector so completely that you become the default concept. The persistent message you send to the marketplace through your massive, relentless actions should be, no one can keep up with me. I'm not going away. I am not a competitor. I am the space.
This is particularly relevant when you have fewer monetary resources than bigger competitors. If you have less money, you can certainly outwork them through sheer, relentless activity.
That's the key leverage point. You should never underestimate how much activity it takes to be noticed. People who post twice a day on social media might think they are taking massive action, but that is little think. They're still operating at average levels in a saturated market.
And the source provides a fantastic illustration of this. When faced with unsubscribes and complaints about initial communication efforts, the response was completely counterintuitive.
Right. They didn't pull back. They increased the activity 10x. They moved from 2 or 3 posts a day to instructing employees to increase electronic strategies 8 times. And the author personally started scheduling tweets 48 times a day.
48 times a day. Once every 30 minutes, 247. I would expect complaints to skyrocket. What was the result?
The result was that complaints did not increase. Instead, they received a massive influx of attention, admiration for the sheer activity level, and compliments for providing free information.
The volume brought so much attention that even competitors mocking it ended up promoting the business just by mentioning it.
So the ultimate problem isn't competition. You can't be beaten by a competitor if you make them irrelevant through scale. The problem is obscurity. And you can't dominate if you don't penetrate.
And you won't penetrate using reasonable, polite levels of activity. The actions must be considered unreasonable by the world. Which brings us to the concept that fuels this level of dedication: obsession.
Chapter 12 states plainly that obsession isn't a disease, it's a gift. The standard dictionary definition of obsession, the domination of one's thoughts or feelings by a persistent idea, is presented not as a pathology, but as a requirement for success.
To dominate your sector, you must first dominate your every thought and consideration.
Absolutely. Until the world sees you as 100% committed, with complete and utter conviction that you will persist, they won't take you seriously. They expect you to retreat at the first sign of resistance.
And the bonfire analogy encapsulates this perfectly.
It does. Obsession should be built like a fire, so big and bright that people feel compelled to sit around it in admiration, warming themselves on your progress. You never cut anything, never dilute greatness, and never put a limit on ambition or drive.
It's a reframing of passion. It notes that once the obsessed finally become successful, they are no longer labeled as crazy, but suddenly as geniuses, exceptions, and extraordinary.
And the source argues if we encouraged this intensity instead of judging it, our society would be overwhelmed with solutions and inventions.
That's a compelling point, because most people are told to maintain balance and avoid becoming too focused. But if you're trying to achieve 10x goals, balance is structurally impossible.
It is. The consequence of small goals is that they prevent you from gathering the right fuel or taking enough action to break through resistance. Nothing truly great happens without someone becoming obsessively focused on the concept.
This intense commitment leads to the second major counterintuitive piece of advice in this section. Reject the notion to undercommit and overdeliver as backward and ridiculous. Instead, overcommit and overdeliver.
The phrase undercommit and overdeliver suggests that fully committing somehow puts you in danger of not delivering, or worse, that you should intentionally set low expectations. Why would you ever aim low?
Right. Why not promise a spectacular Broadway cast and then exceed by overdelivering?
Exactly. The greater the commitment made up front, the higher the level of delivery naturally becomes, because you force yourself to scale to that commitment. Committing first and figuring out how to deliver later is presented as a successful habit.
It creates a self-perpetuating cycle.
It does. In sales, grand claims, overcommitment, and extreme promises immediately separate you from the masses and force you to deliver at 10x levels. And if you start worrying about not being able to deliver,
That means you're creating new problems.
and new problems, as we discussed, are signs of progress. You're heading in the right direction. Most people never bother to perform. They spend their time trying to figure out how to be safe.
And safe is exactly what you need to avoid, especially during economic stress. This leads us to the crucial rule in Chapter 14, expand, never contract.
During major economic contractions, like the recent recession, the world generally contracts, reducing staff, saving money, being cautious. This mindset guarantees failure because it is a form of retreating.
But most financial advisors will tell you to cut costs and save cash during a downturn. How does the source justify acting contrary to that conventional wisdom?
Times of tightening are unique opportunities to take market share from those taking a defensive posture. When everyone else is shrinking, your massive expansion becomes even more visible and potent. The world's contraction should be a green light for you to augment your own forces and seize territory the competition is abandoning.
The author provides his own counterintuitive strategy during a recession. Tell us how that translated into real business decisions.
When revenue began to shrink, he didn't cut employees or promotional spending. Instead, he opted to cut his own salary and redirected those monies to promote the business. He spent more on advertising and marketing in 18 months than he had in the prior 18 years combined.
Just to gain market share from the organizations that were retreating.
Exactly. And this expansion wasn't just monetary. He increased production in every non-monetary resource. 3 books published, 4 new sales programs, 700 training segments, 600 radio interviews, 150 articles and blogs, and thousands of personal calls.
While the rest of the world withdrew and saved their energy, he expanded on every possible front, making it impossible for the market not to see him.
And that illustrates the cost of backing off. Most people attack until they meet resistance, and then they retreat. That signal convinces the market, clients, and competition that you are not fully committed.
A repeated, massive attack over an extended period of time will always be successful.
Always. Because you simply wear down the resistance and absorb the market share left behind by those who contracted.
That unrelenting pressure and mindset brings us to our final section, navigating obstacles, which includes fear, criticism, and how to maximize your time in pursuit of 10x goals.
Starting with section 4.1, fear is the great indicator. If you are taking new actions at new levels, sooner or later, you will experience fear. And the source argues that if you aren't experiencing fear, you are only doing what is comfortable.
And that will only get you more of what you have right now, which by definition is average.
So this is a powerful reframe. Fear is something you want to seek and embrace because it's a sign that you are moving in the right direction. The only thing that should scare you is a complete lack of fear.
So that feeling in your stomach is actually a good thing.
It's a green light. The source material uses the popular acronym. FEAR stands for false events appearing real. Most of what you fear doesn't ever come to pass because it's provoked by emotion, not rational thinking.
So if you feel fear, that is the exact action item. If you fear calling a specific high-value client, call them immediately.
If you fear talking to the boss about a raise, march into their office. Fear of requesting the business means you must ask for the business and keep asking. You must do whatever you fear quickly before that fear gets stronger and convinces you to retreat.
The fire eater analogy drives home the need for speed and totality of commitment.
It does. Like a fire eater exhausting the oxygen the fire needs, you must commit entirely and remove time from the equation to snuff out your fears. If you back off even slightly, you give the fear the oxygen it needs to stay alive and eventually consume your ambition.
Next, we look at the external friction that massive action guarantees. Criticism is a sign of success.
Getting criticized is a surefire sign that you are well on your way and getting the necessary attention. There is no way to achieve serious levels of success without attention, and criticism will follow attention like night follows day.
And it often comes from people who are jealous of your success. Their excuses for their own deficiency morph into reasons why what you are doing is wrong disguised as friendly advice.
You should enjoy life more, slow down, or why are you spending so much energy on that one demanding client? They say these things to make themselves feel better because your abundance of action highlights their deficiency of effort.
You have to anticipate and expect criticism as an essential element of the success formula.
स्वागत है।
The anecdote of a
आज हम
client
एक
who
ऐसी
complained about
किताब के कुछ
aggressive
हिस्सों पर
follow-up
बात करने
is
वाले हैं
highly
जिसका नाम है द
Absolutely.
10x रूल।
The appropriate
इसका
response
आइडिया
is not to
सुनने में
apologize,
बहुत
but
सीधा
to
है,
reward the
लेकिन
staff
सच
for
कहूँ तो
aggressively
ये
seeking success,
दिमाग हिला
refuse to
देता है।
back off, and
सोच ये है
importantly,
कि
because they
अगर
maintain the
असाधारण
relentless
सफलता
pace,
चाहिए
they
तो
close the
लक्ष्य
deal.
भी
And that
साधारण
client later
से
admired
10
the
गुना
staff
बड़े
for
रखने
following up
होंगे
like
और
maniacs
फिर
after
उन तक
realizing
पहुँचने
the
के लिए
commitment level.
मेहनत भी
Success is
10 गुना
your
ज़्यादा
duty,
करनी
your
होगी।
obligation, and your
तो चलिए आज
responsibility.
इसी
It's
सोच
not
की
a
परतों को
popularity
खोलते हैं।
contest.
हम
Once the
शुरुआत करेंगे
naysayers
इसकी
realize you
सबसे
are not
बुनियादी
going away,
और शायद
that you are
सबसे
persistent and
चौंकाने वाली
dominant,
बात से
they will stop
सफलता
judging and
असल में
find
क्या
someone
है
else to pick
और
on.
क्यों ठीक
Okay,
ठाक
moving
या
from
औसत
external
होना ही
friction to
सबसे
internal
बड़ा
focus.
खतरा है।
बिल्कुल
Let's
सही।
address a
और ये
highly
स्रोत इसी
controversial
बात पर
idea
जोर
that goes
देते हैं
against almost
कि ज्यादातर
every
लोग
business
नाकाम
principle.
इसलिए नहीं होते कि वो
Customer
बड़े सपने देखते
satisfaction is the
हैं, बल्कि
wrong
इसलिए कि उनके
primary
सपने बहुत
target.
छोटे होते हैं।
Yes.
और
Wait,
कोशिशें
hold on, let's
उससे भी
challenge
कम।
that.
हाँ,
Isn't the
और
customer always right?
कोशिशें
I thought
उससे
the
भी
whole
कम।
point of business
तो
was to keep
आज
the
की
customer
हमारी
happy.
ये
The
चर्चा
source clarifies.
सिर्फ
Customer
ज्यादा घंटे
satisfaction
काम
is
करने के बारे
certainly
में नहीं
important,
है।
and if your product
ये
isn't
अपनी
built to
पूरी
satisfy, you're
मानसिकता,
negligent.
अपनी पूरी
However,
सोच
customer
को
satisfaction
मतलब
is the wrong
जड़ से
primary
बदलने के
target.
बारे में
Increasing
है।
customers'
हम
acquisition
देखेंगे
is
कि
the right
लोग
target.
आमतौर पर
cannot
किस तरह
satisfy
से
someone
एक्शन
who is
लेते हैं
not yet
और
a
क्यों
customer.
You
सिर्फ
can't,
एक
and
खास
growth
तरह का
demands
एक्शन
focus on
ही
the non-customer.
वो नतीजे
This
दे
is a
पाता है
crucial
जिनके
shift in
बारे में लोग
focus.
बस सोचते
The
रह जाते हैं।
primary
तो
goal
चलिए
must
यहीं
be
से शुरू
commanding
करते हैं।
attention and
ये किताब
generating
सबसे पहले
customers
सफलता
before
की
worrying
हमारी
about making
आम
them happy.
परिभाषा को ही
The
चुनौती
author's
देती है।
company over-delivers
कहती
and
है कि
provides
सफलता
service
कोई
well beyond
चाहत या इच्छा
satisfactory.
नहीं है,
But the
बल्कि
internal
ये एक
conversation
कर्तव्य है,
is
एक
always about how to
जिम्मेदारी।
get more customers.
ये सुनने में थोड़ा
Because
भारी
increasing
लगता है।
satisfaction is
इसके पीछे क्या
impossible
सोच
without
है?
first
इसके
increasing
पीछे
the
तर्क
customer
ये है
base.
कि किसी भी
The real
इंसान,
focus should be
कंपनी
on what
या
the
यहाँ तक
source
कि पूरी
calls
सभ्यता के लिए
non-customer
जिंदा रहने
dissatisfaction.
और आगे बढ़ने
The
के लिए
people who are
सफलता जरूरी है।
dissatisfied
अगर
because
विकास
they don't
नहीं
have
होगा
your product or
तो
service
चीजें
yet
धीरे-धीरे
and
मतलब
may
खत्म
not
हो
even
जाएंगी।
know they are unhappy.
ये उस
Most
आम
companies
धारणा को भी
fail
तोड़ता
not
है
due to
कि
a lack
सफलता
of
एक केक की
quality,
तरह है। कि अगर किसी एक को बड़ा टुकड़ा मिल गया
तो दूसरे के लिए कम बचेगा।
हाँ बिल्कुल, ये सोच ही गलत है।
मतलब ये जीरो सम गेम नहीं है।
बिल्कुल नहीं। इसका सबसे अच्छा उदाहरण आज की टेक इंडस्ट्री है। गूगल के आने से फेसबुक नहीं रुका।
सही बात है।
और जब माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का दबदबा था, तब भी एप्पल ने आकर आईपॉड और आईफोन जैसे प्रोडक्ट से पूरी इंडस्ट्री बदल दी। सफलता की कोई कमी नहीं है, आप अपनी सफलता खुद बना सकते हैं।
ठीक है, ये बात तो समझ में आती है। अगर सफलता एक कर्तव्य है और इसकी कोई कमी भी नहीं है, तो फिर लोग उस बड़े जाल में फंसते कैसे हैं जिसकी बात किताब करती है?
औसत बनकर।
औसत।
हाँ, औसत। स्रोत इसे साफ साफ असफलता का फॉर्मूला कहते हैं, और एक्शन के स्तरों में इसे सबसे खतरनाक लेवल माना गया है।
खतरनाक क्यों? मतलब औसत होना तो सुरक्षित माना जाता है ना?
हाँ, और यही तो जाल है। ये खतरनाक इसलिए है क्योंकि हमारा समाज इसे स्वीकार करता है, बल्कि इसे बढ़ावा देता है। ठीक ठाक नौकरी, ठीक ठाक घर, ठीक ठाक जिंदगी, इसी से मिडिल क्लास बनता है। वो अक्सर आपको असुरक्षित बना देती है।
ये एक बहुत गहरी बात है। मतलब जो चीज सुरक्षित लगती है असल में वही सबसे ज्यादा जोखिम भरी है।
एकदम। इसका एक बड़ा उदाहरण 2008 का वैश्विक आर्थिक संकट है।
अच्छा।
जिन लोगों के लक्ष्य सामान्य थे, जिन्होंने बस एक घर खरीदने और नौकरी बचाने जितना ही सोचा था, वो सबसे ज्यादा बर्बाद हुए।
क्यों?
क्योंकि उन्होंने किसी भी बड़ी अनचाही मुश्किल के लिए तैयारी ही नहीं की थी। उनकी योजना में वो 10x का मार्जिन था ही नहीं।
ये औसत वाला विचार सच में सोचने पर मजबूर करता है। किताब में शायद स्टारबक्स के संस्थापक हॉवर्ड शुल्स का उदाहरण भी इसी सिलसिले में दिया गया था, है ना?
हाँ।
कि जब सब लोग औसत तरीके से काम कर रहे थे, तो वो क्या अलग कर रहे थे?
हाँ, और वो एक बेहतरीन उदाहरण है। 2008 की उसी मंदी के दौरान, जब ज्यादातर कंपनियों के सीईओ सिर्फ खर्चे कम करने पर ध्यान दे रहे थे,
जो कि एक औसत प्रतिक्रिया थी।
बिल्कुल, एक औसत रिएक्शन। उस समय हॉवर्ड शुल्स कुछ और ही कर रहे थे। वो देर रात तक देश भर में घूम रहे थे, अपने स्टोर्स में जाकर सीधे ग्राहकों और कर्मचारियों से बात कर रहे थे, फीडबैक ले रहे थे।
वाह।
सोचिए, एक अरबों डॉलर की कंपनी का सीईओ रात में किसी स्टोर पर जाकर कॉफी के बारे में बात कर रहा है। ये औसत एक्शन से मीलों आगे की बात थी। वो जमीन पर उतरकर समस्या को समझ रहे थे।
तो इसका मतलब है कि एक्शन लेने के और भी तरीके होंगे। किताब में इसका कोई ढांचा दिया गया है क्या कि लोग किस किस तरह से एक्शन लेते हैं?
हाँ, और ये इस पूरी फिलॉसफी का क्या कहते हैं दिल है। किताब में एक्शन के 4 स्तर बताए गए हैं। पहला स्तर है कुछ ना करना।
मतलब आलस
नहीं, सिर्फ आलस नहीं। तर्क ये है कि कुछ ना करने को सही ठहराने में, बहाने बनाने में और फिर उसके नतीजों से दुखी होने में भी बहुत ऊर्जा खर्च होती है।
अच्छा,
तो ये भी एक तरह का काम ही है, बस गलत दिशा में।
दिलचस्प है। तो दूसरा स्तर क्या है?
दूसरा स्तर है पीछे हटना। ये वो लोग हैं जो किसी बुरी असफलता या किसी की आलोचना के बाद अपने लक्ष्य से सक्रिय रूप से दूर भागते हैं।
जैसे कोई कहे शेयर बाजार में मेरा पैसा डूब गया, ये सब जुआ है, मैं अब कभी निवेश नहीं करूंगा।
एकदम सही। वो एक बुरे अनुभव को एक स्थायी नियम बना लेते हैं और मैदानी छोड़ देते हैं।
और तीसरा स्तर जिसकी हमने अभी बात की, सामान्य एक्शन।
ज्यादातर दुनिया इसी पर चलती है।
लोग रोज ऑफिस जाते हैं, अपना काम करते हैं और घर आ जाते हैं।
और ये तब तक ठीक चलता है
जब तक सब कुछ सामान्य हो।
बिल्कुल, लेकिन जैसे ही कोई संकट आता है, ये नाजुक सिस्टम बिखर जाता है।
तो फिर चौथा स्तर क्या है?
चौथा और सबसे जरूरी स्तर, मैसिव एक्शन।
मैसिव एक्शन।
इसका मतलब सिर्फ जबरदस्त एक्शन नहीं है। इसका मतलब है इतना ज्यादा, इतना लगातार एक्शन लेना कि आप बाजार में एक शोर मचा दें, एक ताकत बन जाए।
मतलब इतना एक्शन की,
इतना एक्शन लेना कि आपकी वजह से नई समस्याएं पैदा होने लगे, जैसे कि आपके पास ग्राहकों की लाइन लग जाए या आप जरूरत से ज्यादा व्यस्त हो जाएं। ये मुकाबला करने के बारे में नहीं है, ये अपने क्षेत्र पर हावी हो जाने के बारे में है।
और यही मैसिव एक्शन 10x रूल का असली इंजन है। लेखक ने शायद इसके बारे में अपनी जिंदगी से भी कोई कहानी बताई है। मुझे याद आ रहा है कुछ कोल्ड कॉलिंग जैसा।
हाँ बिल्कुल, एक समय था जब वो अपने बिजनेस के लिए दिन में 40 कंपनियों को कोल्ड कॉल करने का लक्ष्य रखते थे, जो कि सामान्य से कहीं ज्यादा था। लेकिन असली किस्सा सोशल मीडिया का।
अच्छा।
जब उन्होंने सोशल मीडिया पर बहुत ज्यादा पोस्ट करना शुरू किया, तो कुछ लोगों ने शिकायत की कि आप बहुत ज्यादा पोस्ट करते हैं। अब सामान्य एक्शन या पीछे हटने वाला इंसान क्या करता?
वो पोस्ट कम कर देता।
बिल्कुल, इन्होंने उल्टा किया,
उन्होंने और बढ़ा दिया,
10 गुना बढ़ा दिया। ट्विटर पर दिन में 2 पोस्ट से बढ़ाकर सीधे 48 पोस्ट कर दिए।
48?
हाँ, नतीजा कुछ ही हफ्तों में शिकायतें बंद हो गईं और लोग उनकी तारीफ करने लगे कि वो कितने सक्रिय और हर जगह मौजूद हैं। सार ये है कि आपकी सबसे बड़ी समस्या आपका प्रतियोगी नहीं है, आपकी सबसे बड़ी समस्या है गुमनामी।
गुमनामी, एनोनिमिटी।
हाँ, लोग आपको जानते ही नहीं और मैसिव एक्शन गुमनामी को जड़ से मिटा देता है।
ये तो जबरदस्त है, लेकिन इस तरह का एक्शन सिर्फ शारीरिक मेहनत से तो नहीं आ सकता। इसके लिए एक अलग तरह की मानसिकता, एक अलग तरह का ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम चाहिए होगा।
बिल्कुल।
किताब जुनून, डर और आलोचना जैसी चीजों के बारे में भी बात करती है। चलिए जुनून से शुरू करते हैं। आमतौर पर जुनूनी होने को थोड़ा नकारात्मक माना जाता है।
सही कहा, लेकिन यहाँ जुनून को एक उपहार के तौर पर देखा गया है। सोच ये है कि जब तक आप अपने मिशन को लेकर पूरी तरह से जुनूनी, मतलब लगभग दीवाने नहीं होंगे, तब तक कोई भी आपको गंभीरता से नहीं लेगा। यही जुनून आपको वो ऊर्जा देता है जो मैसिव एक्शन के लिए जरूरी है। और ये एक और दिलचस्प विचार से जुड़ा है, ओवरकमिट और ओवर डिलीवर।
ये तो उस आम सलाह के बिल्कुल उल्टा है जो कहती है अंडर कमिट और ओवर डिलीवर।
हाँ, कि वादा कम करो और काम ज्यादा करके दिखाओ।
बिल्कुल।
ये फलसफा कहता है कि नहीं, बड़े वादे करो, ऐसे वादे जो आपको डरा दें और फिर उन वादों को पूरा करने के लिए जी जान लगा दो। ये आपको बड़े एक्शन लेने पर मजबूर करता है।
यहाँ बात और भी दिलचस्प हो जाती है। डर का क्या? ज्यादातर लोगों के लिए डर एक स्टॉप साइन है, रुको खतरा है।
और ये किताब कहती है कि डर एक गो सिग्नल है।
गो सिग्नल?
हाँ, डर इस बात का सूचक है कि आप सही रास्ते पर हैं। आप अपने कंफर्ट जोन से बाहर निकलकर कुछ बड़ा करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। अगर आपको डर नहीं लग रहा तो शायद आप बहुत छोटा खेल रहे हैं।
पाठ में फियर का एक दिलचस्प मतलब भी बताया गया है, फॉल्स इवेंट्स अपीयरिंग रियल।
झूठी घटनाएं जो सच लगती हैं।
वाओ, तो डर को एक स्टॉप साइन की बजाय गो सिग्नल की तरह इस्तेमाल करना, ये तो सोचने का पूरा तरीका ही बदल देता है।
और सलाह ये है कि जैसे ही डर महसूस हो, तुरंत एक्शन लो।
तुरंत।
हाँ, तुरंत। जितनी ज्यादा देर आप इंतजार करेंगे, सोचेंगे, डर उतना ही बड़ा और ताकतवर होता जाएगा। डर को एक्शन से ही जीता जा सकता है।
ठीक है, तो आपने डर पर काबू पाया, मैसिव एक्शन लिया, और फिर अनिवार्य रूप से लोग आपकी आलोचना करना शुरू कर देंगे। ये क्या कर रहा है, ये बहुत ज्यादा है, ये पागल हो गया है।
सही, और आलोचना को भी सफलता के एक और संकेत के रूप में पेश किया गया है।
ये भी एक संकेत है।
बिल्कुल। अगर कोई आपकी आलोचना नहीं कर रहा तो इसका मतलब है कि आप इतना ध्यान ही नहीं खींच पा रहे कि लोग आपको नोटिस करें। गुमनामी आलोचना से ज्यादा खतरनाक है। लेखक एक किस्सा सुनाते हैं जब उनके एक ग्राहक ने शिकायत की कि आपकी टीम बहुत ज्यादा फॉलो अप करती है।
तो उन्होंने अपनी टीम से माफी मांगी होगी।
बिल्कुल नहीं, उन्होंने उस कर्मचारी को सबके सामने इनाम दिया जिसने वो फॉलो अप किया।
सच में?
संदेश साफ था, हम इतना एक्शन लेंगे कि लोग हमें नजरअंदाज न कर सकें। आलोचना इस प्रक्रिया का एक हिस्सा है, इसे स्वीकार करो और आगे बढ़ो।
ये तो दिमाग का पूरा ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम ही बदलने वाली बात है। डर, जुनून, आलोचना, जिन चीजों से हम बचते हैं उन्हें ही सफलता का मीटर बना लो।
एकदम।
किताब में सफल लोगों के कुछ और गुणों का भी जिक्र है, शायद 30 से भी ज्यादा। एक जो मुझे याद है वो था अतार्किक बने। इसका क्या मतलब?
हाँ, विचार ये है कि तार्किक यानी लॉजिकल एक्शन से आपको लॉजिकल नतीजे मिलेंगे, जो कि अक्सर औसत होते हैं। दुनिया के ज्यादातर लोग लॉजिकल हैं।
सही।
लेकिन अगर आपको अतार्किक यानी असाधारण नतीजे चाहिए तो आपको अतार्किक रूप से काम करना होगा। आपको दूसरों की बनाई हुई वास्तविकता की सीमाओं में नहीं बंधना होगा।
जैसे राइट ब्रदर्स ने जब कहा कि वो लोहे की मशीन को हवा में उड़ाएंगे, तो वो एक अतार्किक बात थी।